Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With us today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
Good morning, Dr. Paul. How are you?
I'm doing well, except today we are a little technical. Has unnerved us a little bit, but we're still going to have our program. We were very excited about having Scott Ritter on, and he has some real good credentials for being a whistleblower and telling us what really goes on, and hopefully we can get him back on to tell you the truth, because he has a wealth of information, and he suffered the consequence of telling the truth way back before the Iraq War. So anyway, we'll be talking to him in the future. But today we're going to talk a little bit about a couple different issues. One, we will talk about information, reliability of information, which is what Scott is an expert on, how you sort it all out. He had this personal experience that we respected. But I want to start off with something else that's in the news right now. I don't know. Daniel, I will have to ask you whether or not you're going to be sending a good wishes and goodwill card, and get better soon. But the news is that this is a mixed thing, I guess. It says that that Nancy Pelosi, has positive for COVID.
That's weird.
Wouldn't that fit into the scenario saying, don't the vaccines work? Or could she have fibbed and never took those shots?
He's an anti-vaxxer. Oh, no.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Do you think, is there any chance this is going to change policy? So I don't think so.
Well, they'll say it could have been much worse.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, if she hadn't had it, she might be really, really sick. But I also want to really talk about a project she's been involved with in a very negative way, because of January 6th.
Yes.
Most people know about January 6th, about the insurrection, the takeover. There was a revolution going on, and we saw pictures that didn't prove that, and we actually were denied pictures. And the people who were charged with the insurrection were never allowed to have the record of thousands of hours of revelation of exactly what went on January 6th. That always bothered me. I thought the principle was that the defense had to have all the information that the prosecution had.
Yeah.
But they were denied this. And it seems to me like if it were not a show trial, that this would be declared a mistrial.
Yeah.
We still play that game a little bit. But anyway, they've been prosecuting, and people have been penalized, and people have suffered. There is no doubt about it. But guess what? You already know. January 6th, the judge, six defendants on January 6th. A judge acquitted somebody. Said they were charged with vicious crimes. And the revelation now is they did get some videos out, and it was so unremoved. It was totally remote from what you would expect from an insurrection. So I think that hopefully this will set us a standard and a pattern to try to get over this, because everybody knows that was all politics, but it gets so serious because lives are damaged, and just think of how much mischief has been caused by prosecution, the FBI and the CIA, and how many people that it turned out they were innocent in the end. But it was after they suffered the consequences, financial consequences, social consequences, family consequences, the whole thing. So I hope I'm not overstating this, but this should be good. Let's hope there are some judges that are going to say, hey, we better pay attention on this. So let's see what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's amazing. Matthew Martin is his name. He was charged, I think, with four crimes, all relating to that January 6th insurrection. In fact, what he did do was he walked to the Capitol. He was at the Trump rally. He walked to the Capitol. He said, "Well, I was at the top. They started letting people into the building. They, meaning the police." And I joined them, and they were holding the doors open. The guards were holding the doors open. So I walked in and looked at the rotunda. This is exactly what happened. And it was finally backed up by videotape. And you're right, that does make you wonder about that 14,000 hours that we can't see. But you know, the whole idea that January 6th was an attempted insurrection, they were taking over and going to put Trump in power as the king, that whole thing was just another chapter in the whole Russiagate psyop. This has been a mountain of lies, a mountain of disinformation and misinformation, but the Democrats and many Republicans, they had to have this. They had to build what was basically an unruly mob. Some of them did some bad things, but the majority of them simply went into the people's house, the Capitol, and looked around. They had to build that up as a armed insurrection. Every single thing about this has turned out to be a lie. And now this might be the beginning, this might be a turning point, even though this fellow's life is ruined.
That's right.
He was a federal contractor. He worked at Los Alamos lab. His life is ruined. Hopefully he gets it back, and hopefully this is the beginning of many, many more.
You know, and you even in your statement there that there could be some misdemeanors, committed. That, of course, is very minor and can be recognized. You know, misdemeanors, most of the time they get a traffic ticket or something along those lines. But the real crime that is going to go unchallenged, at least so far, of people who told these lies, these official people, they should be the criminals that be arrested, at least kicked out of office if they're public officials.
Yes.
But that is really criminal. The criminal system in this country is, just a total political machine. So it's really, to me, very sad, because there was a time in my life, I hope I wasn't totally misled, but there was actually individuals that I knew and met that that deserve some respect, that they work for the FBI and they were working there for the right reason. But the credibility, even if they still exist, their credibility is lost now too, because if people use this system for making these charges, and then you talk about cover-up, the official cover-up, you can't even look at these films, and it was obviously the case for the judge to look at these. He didn't tinker around, reduce the penalties.
Yeah.
He said, I don't know what his words were, but it looked to me like he said, "This is all fraudulent. Get out of here," and then dismissed the whole mess.
Yeah, the judge ruled that his testimony was largely credible when he dismissed it. There are pictures of him, and we don't have them here, but there are pictures of him in the rotunda walking around. The thing about this, Dr. Paul, is it's such lies and propaganda. And I remember on our time on Capitol Hill, we had several such events that occurred. One of them was Occupy Wall Street, where our office was quote unquote occupied by a group of loud people banging on things and making a lot of noise. They didn't shut down the Capitol. They didn't arrest hundreds of people. It was considered an okay protest. And there were several other, I think one of them may have been the Dreamers or someone like that who came in. It happened several times that people came in and disrupted the actions of Congress. But because it didn't fit the narrative of Trump trying to take over, deprive Biden of the most votes in history of the world for president, it makes you wonder what they were afraid of.
Yes, this in general terms deals with a subject we deal with almost every day, and that is seeking out the truth. Who's on the right side of the law and law and order, and who's a true whistleblower. This whole thing, but it's ongoing, and right now we spent quite a few hours, you spent quite a few hours dissecting all the charges made when we were dealing with how do we get the truth out about Iraq.
Yeah.
And of course that's what Scott Ritter was involved in too. But we spent hours and hours of doing this, and yet the American people were controlled by the propagandists,
yeah,
and the lies that were told. So the liars won, and we ended up with a war that they said, oh, well, it lasted for 19 years. No, it's ongoing. It's sort of like the 20-year war in Afghanistan, and it's distortion. It's motivated by, things like profits and political power and all sorts of things. So it's a tragedy that the real victim in these last several decades has been truth, and having people willing to speak it out. Now, this is why the people who are telling the lies can't stand anybody that's telling the truth. And if you tell the truth about natural immunity, you might lose your job in an hour.
Yeah.
Because it's telling the truth about and exposing the people that have lied about what was going on with COVID. But what about this foreign policy thing? We have a lot of lies going on there. And the article today that I wanted to refer to is written by DeCamp. He on anti-war, and his point is that the United States publicizes bad intelligence. So that's another factor. Is it just totally accepted, or is it just somebody was careless and mischievous and didn't know what they were talking about, or is it all, some people might even call it a conspiracy, but that's rather radical to say it's a conspiracy. But it certainly is a conspiracy of ignorance and an agenda that contradicts everything that we believe when it comes to peace and prosperity.
And the article is what DeCamp is writing about, and everyone's talking about it, and several have written about it. This was an NBC News article that came out. It was based on interviews with several intelligence sources. And the title of the article from NBC News is, "In a break with the past, U.S. is using intel to fight an info war with Russia, even when the intel isn't rock solid." Now, there's a couple of things about this if you want to unpack it a little bit. First of all, they're admitting this, which is interesting. Second of all, duh, right? Because they've been lying to us all the time. But what it is fascinating because they're admitting, and NBC News is not exactly friendly to our perspective. They're admitting that the administration is passing off intelligence to the media as fact, things that are of low confidence or even just false information or supposition. They're basically admitting that they are making things up, selling it to the media, which uncritically reprints everything that's fed to them by the administration, our wonderful free press. And here are just a few of the things that we now know they were fake. They were lying to us. First of all, that there was an impending chemical attack. That's what sparked the whole thing. Russia is planning a chemical attack, a false flag chemical attack, made up, fake. China sending weapons to Russia. Remember that was a big thing a couple of weeks ago. Fake, total lies. The other one, and this was big, and I remember watching this when I was at the gym on Fox News. Putin's advisors are misinforming him and misleading him about the war. They're terrified to tell him the truth about how badly it's going. Lies, total lies, now that we know this. This is the big one, Russia is about to produce a false flag video to justify their invasion of Ukraine. Fake, lies. They admit that they lie. So a couple of questions this raises, Dr. Paul. First of all, it's illegal for the intelligence services of the United States to use their power to propagandize the American people. We know that's illegal. And now we know that they're doing it. What does it say about our intelligence agencies? What does it say about us as a society that we allow this to happen? Look how it shaped the perception of this war in Ukraine. It shaped everything about the perception in the United States of war based on lies. And what does it say about our intelligence community if they allow themselves to be used and abused like this? Can they ever be trusted again?
To fit into this scenario, they wanted to, paint Russia as badly as they could. And there was a recent event that came up because they had pictures of the Russians having a mobile crematorium going around and taking care of the people who had been killed. And it was the pictures. It makes you question all the pictures. And some of them may be true, but they've lost all credibility. And didn't that happen in the Persian Gulf War as well as in the Iraq War?
Exactly.
It was always the false propaganda and the false pictures. But here, this one, Russian mobile crematorium tweet is from, guess what, when they looked into it, when you seek out the truth and you get to the truth, I don't know who gets the credit, but somebody gets credit for digging this up. But from an 8-year-old YouTube video.
Yeah.
And you know, you'd think the criminals would use, maybe they don't have a soul nor a brain. They just go do it because they do some pretty dumb thing. It's amazing that scenario they gave us, about January 6th, how it lasted so long. And yesterday was probably the first time that they really, really cracked it. There's been criticism by a lot of good people saying, why don't we have it, especially the victims?
Yeah.
But it's really just finally getting to the point. So it's, once they put a falsehood out there, to prove that the falsehood is wrong, that's a real job in a political world, especially when 98% of the official media have already propagandized it, to the American people. So to get people to look back and say, look, this is why it's so important for all of us, we especially, because we try to relay this information to others, but everybody should be very cautious about where they're getting the information. It's the source of the information that makes all the difference, not the scandalous stories that we hear or the atrocities that are being claimed. We got to find out who's telling the truth, and believe me, it's not an easy job, especially if you spend very much time in Washington.
Yeah, that's a good point. The whole purpose of this psyop, this mobile crematoria psyop, was to give people the impression that the Russians are slaughtering everything in sight in Mariupol, because that's where the real battle is taking place right now. So to give the idea, and you remember, they did the same thing with COVID. Remember, there are mobile freezer units that are going around because the morgues are overfull and they're overflowing. Total lies. And here we have the same thing about this, which makes you wonder. Now, we know this war is hell, and we know that it's hell on earth for the people that are there. Why do they feel the need to make up lies to make it seem worse? Is their case that weak? What is it all about? And here's another thing that's interesting. This lie, this fake tweet, was from an organization called Nexta TV. They're a U.S. government-funded propaganda source. They are the free media and the free news of the area. They've been behind a lot of these psyops thus far. So the U.S. government is funding media, in turn is lying back to the United States and to the U.S. people about a war.
One thing I'd rather they concentrate on is emphasizing the atrocious things that happen from our policies, and there are a lot. And to me, the number one thing is the attack on our liberties, whether it's fighting the war against COVID or for wars overseas and people dying and all these things. There's so many atrocious results, but that isn't quite as I guess attention-getting as a crematorium. That is just plain old facts, and people don't quite understand. That's the real issue, because everything they do, our foreign policy, when it's based on world empire and going to war without declaration, all the things that we do that we're not supposed to and technically aren't allowed to and are immoral. We don't concentrate on the atrocities, the terrible complications from that, because you could paint some pretty interesting pictures if people are really concerned about living in a free society. But the people, it's very appealing to see these scare tactics and just what we talked to, whether it's COVID or whether it's a war someplace in the Middle East.
And it is, we do feel a little bit better when we see some of the truth coming out after this mountain of lies, whether it's about January 6th, whether it's about the Russia-Ukraine war. But it's not enough to temper some of the frustration that we have. Back when the insurrection, quote unquote, took place, and we wrote a slight skeptical article about it, we lost one of our board members at the Ron Paul Institute because he said, how dare you question that this was an insurrection? I won't say who it was, but it's someone that I had enormous respect for. And it still stings to have that happen. And now when we see the story falling apart, I hope that person and many other people who rushed to judgment, who rushed to call us bad people, might stop and pause and be skeptical. And it's kind of sad that we live in a world where we can't trust anyone. Can't trust the government for sure, but that is the world we live in, and we have to understand it, and we have to keep fighting these battles.
You know, there's an article today by Ted Galen Carpenter with Cato, and his point is talking about whitewashing Ukraine's corruption. And, you know, that is important, is information that is valuable, but in some ways, for me, it's secondary to the bigger picture. Why are we there? Why are we in the middle of this? Why do we go and do this? And do we have corruption? You know, so the corruption in Ukraine, he's trying to get a balance there to understand, you know, the conflict, the Ukrainians against the Russians, instead of, is it a NATO battle and a U.S. battle against a system that would like to revive, Soviet communism. And the fight goes on, and the Cold War is building up again, and this sort of thing. But this is important, but I also think it's important for people to realize, and we're exactly talking about the corruption, the lying and cheating and stealing, and the use of the courts to distort things. So it looks like a lot of countries are involved, but here we're whitewashing the Ukrainian corruption, pretending that we can justify the war, and justify us being there. And of course, there are problems around the world. There always will be problems. There are economic problems and political problems. But the whole point is that a nation that decides that they know everything and that they need an empire. And this whole thing is about empire. You know, it's the conflict of the old empires and the disappearance of the Soviet system, and where the lines are going to be drawn. And this is what the whole fight is over. Is it going to be right on Russia's border, or does Russia want a breathing space?
Yeah.
It's not, to me, that complicated.
Yeah. Well, and on the corruption in Ukraine, the United States actually facilitates and promotes the corruption, because if you go ahead and pump in a few $100 million into a country, you're surprised when someone starts lining their pockets with it? You know, give me a break. I'm going to close out, Dr. Paul. I apologize, we haven't made our announcement about the specifics of our conference. It is on June 4th. It will be in Houston. We had to iron out a couple of small details. I wanted to have them all ironed out before we send it out to you all, but just mark the date down. It'll be a hotel in Houston. It's a nice hotel. We have some great speakers. We're going to talk about a lot of this geopolitical shifting situation. So something will go out in the next day or two, hopefully today, if we can get a couple of final details ironed out. But we look forward to seeing all of you. We always have a great time visiting with all of you at these conferences, and I hope that they're worthwhile. And, well, they'll tell if they come, it'll be worthwhile.
Very good. And I want to close out with re-emphasizing a point we were making during the program, and that is the good news about what a judge did that had some dealings with the people who were charged with insurrection, and he decided it was all a bunch of baloney, and he acquits an individuals and understand that nobody else so far has gotten that far along in the courts, and he just threw it all out and said this is not true, and dismissed the case. And my argument, of course, is the whole case should be dismissed, because I think it's a show trial, and I believe what they're doing now is just abuse of justice, as it was, because the defense should have a right to their information. This whole trial should be dismissed. It should be dismissed because it's based on a lot of distortion, and a lot of people will say outright lying. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.